It has been a long wait, but the MagSafe-Compatible case in Slate Grey from RIMOWA is finally here. Ever since I returned the aluminum version with disappointment, I've been hoping this release would better align with what I actually need. At the same time, I've been a little skeptical, especially about the slate gray color and how the polycarbonate finish would look in person. Now that I finally have it, let's take a closer look at the details. While I didn't have the same expectations for this case as I did for the aluminum one, I was mainly curious about how the polycarbonate in slate gray would look in person. The photos on RIMOWA's website made it seem more matte, so when I opened the box, the glossy finish caught me off guard in a pleasant way. It has a smoother, more reflective surface than I anticipated, and the ridges feel a bit more defined because of it. Another detail I noticed right away is that this case is made in China, whereas the aluminum version is made in Germany. I'm not sure if that contributed to the release delay, but it's something to note between the two versions. Even though the brushed finish of the aluminum case feels more premium and integrated with the phone, the polycarbonate version doesn't necessarily feel cheap. The glossy surface is a nice touch. It gives the material a cleaner, more polished look. And the color reads slightly differently under different lighting, which adds a bit more depth than I expected for polycarbonate. If you own an essential suitcase in slate gray, the case matches that line almost perfectly in tone and overall finish, which feels intentional on RIMOWA's part. That's the same consistency you see with their recent release of a ballerina pink, where the color carries through both the suitcase and the phone case, which makes me think that might have been another strategic delay for slate gray as well. Overall, my first impression is that the case looks different from how it appears online. Glossier, a little richer in person, yet still very much aligned with RIMOWA's design language. Putting it on the iPhone 17 Pro, it doesn't have the same magical feeling or satisfaction as the aluminum case, something I just can't lie about. But to be fair, I never expected it to feel the same. The aluminum version had that seamless, almost engineered snap that made it feel like an extension of the phone. This polycarbonate version feels more like a traditional case, which isn't necessarily bad, it's just different. Overall, the case feels lightweight, although it's technically a bit heavier than the aluminum one at 1.6 ounces instead of 1.2 ounces. Physically, I can barely tell the difference, but visually, the slate gray looks heavier. The TPU sides are the same material used across all RIMOWA cases, so the grip, the texture, and the flexibility feel familiar. The camera control button is still exposed for the polycarbonate version, while the rest of the buttons are covered with clickiness that feels surprisingly responsive. Despite the material differences, the polycarbonate case still feels carefully finished, with rounded corners, contrasting textures, and a raised lens frame. You don't get the seamless material match of the aluminum version, which I still prefer on the silver iPhone 17 Pro. The matching materials and ridges aligned perfectly with the phone, but it has its own subtle, more casual charm. At the end of the day, I'm trading that visual satisfaction for practicality. Being MagSafe compatible matters more for how I use my phone daily, even if it means giving up the look I preferred. It's a compromise that makes sense for me right now. Since the old case for my iPhone 13 Pro is also made of polycarbonate, I naturally put them side by side for comparison. On the inside, there's not much to note besides the placement of the printed logos. The differences are subtle. The main distinction is on the back. What I'm really happy about with the iPhone 17 Pro case is the glossy finish. In my opinion, it looks better, feels smoother, and most importantly, gives the case more character. I think if slate gray had the same matte finish as the 13 Pro case, it would look dull and less chic. It also wouldn't match the rest of the polycarbonate line of RIMOWA products. In that sense, this case is an improvement in design language through the finishing. The subtle reflection from the gloss also emphasizes the ridges more, giving the case a sense of depth and dimension that the previous version didn't have. While the aluminum case still delivers the most premium feel, the glossy polycarbonate version is a solid second choice for those willing to trade a bit of luxury for practicality. It's similar to how RIMOWA differentiates their aluminum suitcases from their polycarbonate ones. The design language remains, but the materials signal a different tier. And yet, even with polycarbonate, the overall proportions, the edge detailing, and the lens frame feel deliberate and refined. Aside from that, the iPhone 17 Pro case is slightly thicker than the 13 Pro, though the difference is only noticeable when you put them side by side. Otherwise, the thickness is inconspicuous and it doesn't affect handling or fit. Overall, this comparison shows that while the polycarbonate case doesn't reach the premium feel of aluminum, it makes small improvements in finish and design language that give it its own appeal. The whole point of returning the aluminum case and waiting this long for the polycarbonate version was to keep everything I rely on from being MagSafe compatible. Wireless charging is an important part of how I use my phone daily, so having that feature back genuinely makes a difference. It means I can use the Apple MagSafe battery pack again, charge my phone on my wireless stand at home, and top it off in the car while I'm driving. Those small conveniences add up more than I expected. I debated for the longest time whether it was worth returning the aluminum case just to get MagSafe back. For a while, I tried to convince myself that I could live without it, especially because the visual satisfaction of the aluminum version on the silver iPhone 17 Pro was hard to beat. But eventually, function won. Day-to-day usability mattered more than holding onto a case that limited how I charge my phone. So even though I'm very much an aesthetics-driven person, this switch was ultimately about practicality. And now that I have MagSafe again, I'm much more satisfied with how the phone fits into my routine. I've held it back until now to talk about my biggest disappointment, the color. I honestly cannot understand why RIMOWA keeps choosing Slate Grey, not just for this phone case but across so many of their products. It's such a niche shade with that distinct greenish undertone, and it doesn't really pair well with anything unless it's more slate gray. It's cohesive within their own lineup, yes, but outside of that ecosystem, it's a hard color to style. I can't lie and pretend I like it. And the more I think about it, the more it feels like the only reason RIMOWA hasn't released a MagSafe-compatible case in a more versatile color, like black, is because it would make the black aluminum case a much harder sell. A glossy black polycarbonate version, MagSafe-compatible, would honestly be the dream configuration. It would look clean, modern, effortless, and it would easily compete with the aluminum option in terms of visual appeal. But the reality is, it doesn't exist. And instead, we're left with slate gray. A color that feels intentional within RIMOWA's design system, but not necessarily the most flattering or universal choice for a phone case. The small, unexpected surprise of the glossy finish on the back and the return of MagSafe compatibility are essentially what I traded the aluminum case for. At the end of the day, no one is forcing me to buy a case from RIMOWA, but as someone who's a genuine fan of the brand and its design language, this still feels like the best option for me right now. Do I like this case 100%? Absolutely not. I can't justify how much I dislike the color, and that part still frustrates me. But does it bother me enough to return it again and switch to something else on the market? The answer is also no. The functionality matters to me too much, and the overall build quality still aligns with what I expect from RIMOWA. So for now, this is the compromise I'm living with. Solid design, great practicality, questionable color. And hopefully, in the future, RIMOWA gives us more versatile color options, so we don't have to choose between aesthetic satisfaction and functionality. Drop a comment and let me know if you agree with me on the color choice. I'd love to hear your thoughts.